everyone, and welcome to the October 2022 edition of our NFCA webinar presented by Rapsodo. We're going to get into hitting metrics today. Very excited to have you with us. We will hear presentations from a panel of great coaches and get into some question and answer throughout as well at the end. As always, please check out previous webinars at nfca.org. And if there's ever anything we can do for you, don't hesitate to let us know. You can reach us via social media, email, or give us a call. Thanks so much for joining, and here we go. All right, everybody. Coach Tarr, you are up. Thank you so much for joining us, and whatever you want to do to kick us off, go for it.
Wow, whatever I want to do. All right. Well, thanks for having me, you guys, and thanks for joining. It looks like we have a lot of participants. That's exciting. And I'm looking forward as well to learning. So now I'm going to be a participant too, but I have to give a shout out to Lindsay Leftwich from LSU, because last NFCA convention I was presenting, and she was saying like, oh, you could like totally do up your Mighty Are the Women thing and give me that logo. And she took it in like 3 minutes and like made me a cool PowerPoint background. And Lindsay, thanks, I'm using your background. So I have to give credit where credit is due, but I'm excited to share. I think I'm excited to go first because I'm going to basically bail myself out of any technology snafus or questions that I probably can't answer, because I'm going to talk a little bit more holistically and globally about what we do at Washington in terms of technology. So without further ado, I apologize. First of all, my cat's so annoying. I'm hardly ever home. And when I'm home, he like gets all over the screen. So I'm going to politely apologize here in advance, but I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go along here with this presentation. So here we are, measuring what matters. I think something that we've done a really good job with in our program to continue to stay as consistent as we can is we do care a lot about the things that we do measure. And so when you talk about technology, technology is a definite part of how we run our program. And technology does go into a lot of things that we do, and I'll share with you that. But I wanted to share first, like how we kind of came to a lot of our philosophies. This is a rather new book, Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And if you haven't read it, I highly suggest it. I more so read the audiobook as a suggestion to somebody who watched me present on something else before. And they're like, oh, you must have read Measure What Matters. And I'm like, no, actually, I haven't, but that sounds like a perfect book for how I think. And certainly the book definitely lines up with how I've learned to think about a program and building a program. But one of the big things and takeaways from that book is this acronym called OKRs. And the OKRs stand for objectives and key results. The other thing that the book goes into is how a bunch of like in the now companies run their goal setting. And so talking about making your goals be everybody's goals, meaning your players, your student athletes, the people in your programs, not just yours as a coach or coaching staff. But the other thing that I want to talk about is the use of the critical path. And so the critical path is how we talk about what goes into the things that we measure, what goes into our daily, what goes into our year as a program. And we use this concept called the critical path. And talk a little bit about team development, player development, and program development with the critical path. So this is something I drew, but it's not like the path of success where you're like, the red is what everybody goes through. Rather, the red is what we're trying to eliminate as a program in terms of confusion and adding a whole bunch of ideas to the things that we do. We want to stay on the purple line, actually. And we question everything that comes into our program that's new, where we use these questions like, why are we doing it? Is it going to help us win? And is it going to be something that's related to what's on our critical path? So I'm going to get to the critical path in a second. But again, we're trying to avoid being the red line. We want to be the purple line, and we don't want to add a whole bunch of things that aren't going to help us win. We also use something called the cauldron. The cauldron that I learned comes from Dean Smith, the UNC basketball coach. I know Anson Dorrance, also from UNC, is someone I've read a lot about and how they use this idea called the competitive cauldron. So there are things that you use as a program. For us, I'll get into those, but things that you want to measure and things that you want to make matter. Okay, so some of our things, our cauldron, this is from 2014, and to this day, we still use this. And they're things that we'll use throughout our practices, throughout our season, but we would call these like our championship bricks. So the things on the left side of this grid have to do with what is on our critical path, mostly the tactical things. But I just wanted to show you an example of what like one of our post-weekend summary charts look like game by game and kind of how we measure our goals. What they are, I don't think are as important. That's not necessarily what this is about. This is a technology webinar, but I just wanted to show and demonstrate like almost even like how we actually have used technology, just even in this small capacity through an Excel sheet to demonstrate like how we keep track of the things that matter and that are on our critical path. So this is the first edition of our critical path. So if you take a look at the 5 categories that are in this, the first one is tactical, the second one is mental, the third one is academic, the fourth one is our functional and fitness goals, and the last one are the core values of the program. The first one being tactical. If you go in there, you can look and you can see those things that matter to us. Dominant pitching, routine defense, putting pressure on the defense offensively, and being able to execute successfully under pressure. So you can look in there deeper and you can say like, oh, dominant pitching, they measure that with these certain things, whether, you know, this has changed throughout the years. If you look at the date of this critical path, it's from 2012. So many years ago. I'll show you at the end our one from this year, but one of the things that we'll measure with our pitching and things that we measure with our pitching are our pitchers' command, their ability to be deceptive, their velocity, and their ability to move the ball. Now in 2012, we had no idea what Rapsodo was. All we really knew were like, you know, the ball moves, the ball has the right spin, this pitcher is somewhat deceptive, this pitcher has command. So we didn't really have the technology to measure that. Routine defense for us, we don't use these percentages anymore, but certainly at that time we were trying to measure how we handle the ball. Our ability to put pressure on the defense, you could say nowadays, you know, you can measure that technologically, and that, yes, we try to do that, but we also probably measure it a little bit more like binary, like it's a yes or a no. And whether it be our athletic trainer on a chart or something for our defense, you know, technology might help us do it better, but the things that we measure are pretty much the same. We'll go on down. I think one thing that we have like really tried to enhance, besides the mental game and the academic stuff, but the functional and fitness stuff is trying to measure sleep. And, you know, how do you do that as a coach? How do you do that as a program? You know, there's some devices that you can do in there, but certainly it's something that we value, our sleep and our recovery. And so, you know, we've used technologies such as Fitbit, Whoop, those kind of things to measure that. So again, this is about technology, but this is more so for me personally about our critical path. I'm going to go to the next slide. So throughout the years, this is another one, excuse me, from 2016, I believe. And if you looked at the one from before and the more current one, I suppose, we have a lot of the same things that we've measured. Certainly, you know, technologies have allowed us to do different things, but even back in 2016, I don't think we had, you know, more than a radar gun and a stopwatch really to measure things. Of course, like video, scout video and that kind of stuff, but not much beyond that. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is kind of a live look into how our critical path looks this year. So we've changed the titles. So instead of saying tactical, we call it our craft. And then secondly, we want to train our mind. And then our other craft is our school, things like that. And then our body. And then the last one, we used to call it core values, but we want to value the things that we want to have in our environment, in our everyday, just our everyday, how we roll. So that is pretty much what I wanted to communicate. So if I could go back and get involved in this a little bit more to how we really like look at things today, I'd like to go to the dominant pitching one. So using Rapsodo in practice as frequently as we possibly can. That's something that we definitely rely on. There's two Rapsodo units if you're not familiar. So there's a incoming data receiver, and then there's an outgoing data receiver in terms of the Rapsodo. So we're lucky enough that a donor was able to give us these just last year. We invested in them. So they gave us the money to buy them, and we got both, the hitting one and the pitching one, if you will. And then we've had Flight Scope as a program for many years, but if you know anything about our program, we don't play a lot of home games. We travel a lot, and the Flight Scope until recently was more of a permanent technology that you kind of had to have almost embedded in your stadium, but now there's more of a travel one that you can bring with you. So we're able to use that a little bit more of how we've always wanted to. And last year was probably one of the more, like, I guess the first year that we could really utilize that Flight Scope data to help us understand our program a little bit more, and our players and our player development model. If you go to routine defense, it's pretty much, there's some technologies out there that can help you in terms of spray charts and how you want to play behind all of your pitchers, because each player probably has a little bit of a different field that you have to play behind. But certainly the things that we measure for how efficient our defense is, we use just basic stats that come from a stat book, like our defensive efficiency rating. That's just, can we convert a ball in play into an out, to, just valuing the phrase like 21 outs only. If we go to the execute successfully under pressure, it's just like playing the game in parts, not letting the game get too big, and playing for the moment, and just really rounding out like our team mentalities, where we want to have the same mindset, or a collective mindset, when we have nobody on, nobody out. Like, what are we trying to do when we have a runner at one with nobody out, runner at one with one out, runner at three with less than two outs? Like, what's our mindset? What's our mentality for that? You go to the mind thing. We've recently been able to work with S2 cognition. This was like of the recent week, so I don't have this in this form, but certainly how the brain works and how each individual's brain works, that's that company's expertise. So we're using a little bit of that technology to help us. So beyond that, going down into the body and the things that we're trying to measure there, those things, if you have a great strength coach and a great, maybe nutrition department, stuff like that, we're lucky too. So we get to use those people to help us measure the things that matter for us in that department. But one of the big things that we're always about for our athletes is academically managing the focus, and managing a planner, and how to use an academic planner. And certainly, like, the way that we measure how we use that is like, do you have one, and is it working for you? And we show up every day with that. So beyond that, that is what I wanted to provide. I don't know if we're on a time clock, but I'm looking down at my clock, and I know it's for me 5:20, 8:20 for many of you guys. So I'm going to stop talking, and maybe Joanna, you can help me out here.
You got it, Coach. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And, just a couple of questions that have come through the chat for you. What's the difference when you talk about training with technology that you use in the off season, like now preseason, and when you use during games? Does that vary?
Yeah. So I think if you look at like what we're able to do, you can't use Rapsodo. And in regulation games, we use, like, currently our program uses blast motion, and the bats that we have don't have the embedded sensor. So we really can't use those either. So we really rely on the Flight Scope information to give us the information that we want, whether that be what the pitches are doing that we're seeing, what the pitches are doing that we're delivering. So I would say more so, we try to use flight scope as consistently as possible in any scrimmage environment that we have.
Thanks, Coach. Another question for you. If you take off your Washington hat and put on your USA softball hat, what kind of technology differences maybe do you use with a team you don't see as often versus a team you see every day?
Well, I think that the sad thing with USA is right now we don't necessarily have the manpower to do the things that we can in college. Now, certainly if we had, more volunteer help or more help, just all the way around, we could definitely use this same exact technology and would love to. There's probably some different rules for the WBSC and some of those tournaments. They might like freak out if we pulled up the flight scope in the, World Games or something like that. But I think there's a lot to be said about where we aren't in the world with USA softball and the things that we could certainly continue to do and be doing as a sport, even just more like from the top down. Like these are the things that we do at the highest level in sport, and the highest level isn't like the capacities of the college program. We would want it to be our USA softball program, but we're lucky enough to have contributors from the college game on our staff. When we do put our staffs together, we can use some of those technologies if we have the manpower and the time to do it, which many times we don't have.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate that and appreciate you. Thank you for joining us for your segment. Coach Tarr will be back. So if you have questions that I didn't get to, make sure you drop those in the chat and we'll have those ready for her at the end when we come to the full panel. But we're going to keep on rolling. Next up, we have LSU in the house. We have Howard and Lindsay, two coaches for Double the Fun. You two can start your share, whatever you would like to do. Thank you so much for joining us.
Share. Okay, I'm going to share my screen while Howard fills time because he's great at that.
Hey, thanks for having us. Thanks for everyone coming on, taking the time to do this. We started doing data stuff the last 3 or 4 years, and it came to our attention that if kids nowadays, especially in high schools, if they're going to be data driven, then they're going to learn by that, since everything goes by test scores. To school now is all data. That's all you're hearing about on TV and games. That we better learn. If we're going to learn by that, then we better teach by that. And then we have to use the data that we have in the way we want to use it and give it to our kids in the right ways and the right areas to where it works for us, not so much just overloaded with data that doesn't mean anything to them. And so Lindsay's kind of our data tech guru. Whenever you guys call and said, hey, we want to do this, I'm like, I'm not doing this. Lindsay's doing it, because I'm just going to tag along with her. So Lindsay's the one that did all the PowerPoint here and does a lot of our data. I'm still old school, so I'm still learning how to use some of this data stuff too, and using how we use it and what I want to do with it. So Lindsay has a little bit more in depth for it. So
I'd like to say that we're not old school. We're from the win school, so we just want to win. So if it's new or old, who cares? Let's figure it out, right? Can you guys see our screen? Did it work? Okay, perfect, sweet. Let's roll. So just in general, we're gonna just talk about like some things that we think you guys can put into play right away. And so for us, some things that like we measure on a whole all the time. We're gonna look at pitch speed, we're gonna look at exit velocity, we're gonna launch angle, and then how you get to all those things. A big, huge part of that is gonna be with just your bat speed in general. So then we'll kind of hit on exit velo and launch, and then how we train bat speed to get to that space. So like in this case, Amanda Doyle, before we really started hitting some bat speed stuff, we would say that like from a launch angle perspective, she cut stuff a ton. So on a normal basis, she would hit something at 40 and she would hit it straight up. And at Tiger Park, a ball you hit at 40 is not going out. Like that's going to balloon and get caught in the outfield. No big deal. Started doing some bat speed stuff with her. And all of a sudden her exit velocity numbers started to get higher and higher and higher. And then it didn't matter what her launch was, because she was hitting stuff so hard that it really worked out for us. So you see in this video, this ball's like super high, right? So that's why it's 40, because it's up there and it gets out. And that was something that like this year, like in our first, 4 games that we played, 5 games that we played, I think Duh hit 6 home runs. Like she mashed like right off the bat. And like, I think that it really just had a ton to do with like some of the bat speed stuff we decided that she was missing. We're the same as Washington. We use our flight scope for stuff. We're about to change to like a Hawkeye type system. I think it's just a little more reliable, but the flight scope is not something that I would say is super financially attainable for a lot of people probably on this webinar. So we'll talk about some other things that you can do in order to get some of that information. But things that we measure a lot is going to be exit velo, spin, launch angle, and then bat speed. And then in order to get bat speed, you have to have good connection, good plane, a decent attack angle, and some rotational acceleration. When Amanda Sanchez is on this video, when she got here, she was a really, really good player. She was transferred from Missouri, like an incredible player. But like we kind of identified one thing in her swing that we thought would make her better. And instantly she went from playing on a short porch at Mizzou to playing in our big park. But because we kind of identified this one thing that was really connected to her connection, she went from hitting, I don't know, 8 home runs a year to, I don't know what she hit when she was here. She had like 15. Yeah, and she was an All-American that year. But it was literally just because we fixed one thing in connection and we changed her bats and we changed her bat speed numbers by doing that. And instantly the ball started to travel better. So if this is what we're using, we think that this is what you can use to do some of the same things. So from an exit velo perspective, you can use a radar gun to see a lot of things. You can set it up behind no plate. You just got to make sure it's far enough back. The closer it is to the screen, the harder it is to read. So you want to be like at least 15 feet back from wherever your contact point is going to be. And you want to set it on the widest angle possible. And then it'll read the majority of the things. Now, obviously, if you balloon something really high, you're not going to know what that is. But you can at least start to get some numbers. And then if you're looking at some of the other things that we can trade from that, we're going to look at some spin stuff, like meaning and how we strike the ball. If we found that the less number of spin, like the less rotations off the bat, the further the ball travels, especially at our place. We have some weird wind off the river. And if you hit stuff really spinny and really high, it doesn't go anywhere here. So you have to hit stuff much more firm. Like we want to knuckle some things almost. And then when we were measuring launch, before we like really started to understand the flight scope, we would just strung a rope in the cage and decided that like, if you can hit things on this line of this rope all the time, then the ball really does what it's supposed to do. And then obviously from a blast perspective, we look at connection, plane, attack angle, and rotational acceleration. Blast is incredibly cheap, but if you don't have enough money to buy one for every kid, then buy one for your whole team. And you can really do some things from there. So once you know what you're looking for, this is a lot of information, but I'll let Howard talk about some of it and why we think it's important. Once you know what you're looking for, then you can work backwards. So this is what we're looking for. We have a Quinn. Most of you don't have a Quinn. She's like the most incredible Excel person you've ever seen in your whole life. So she spits this stuff out for us all the time. We tell her what we think is important and she just shoots it to us. So this is every ball that we put in play at Tiger Park in 2022. It would be us putting it in play and other teams putting it in play when you get over here in the green and yellow sections. And then the section in blue was all of our players that put balls in play. So like what you start to see is like their average exit speed and like their max exit speed like starts to show up, and like you start to see some of the discrepancies. Some of it is pitch, some of it is timing, some of it is all those things. But you notice right off the bat, obviously the harder you hit something, the further it goes. And then when you're looking at the yellow where it talks about home run, double, triple, singles, etc., like we found that over time, the whole time we've had a flight scope, like if you hit things at our place anywhere between 15 to 26 degrees, it's a hit almost every time. Like literally 90% of the time it's a hit if you hit it at that angle and you hit it above 60 miles an hour. If you hit it above 65 miles an hour, like, and you can see it in this green data down here, if you hit it above 65 miles an hour, you're going to hit 665 and you're going to be like a 27-time All-American, right? Like, so there's some really good things in there. So the obvious correlation is the harder we're hitting stuff at the correct angle, further the ball travels. Further the ball travels, the better hitter you are.
So what we want to try to do is, the reason why we see the minimum exit speed and the maximum is that we want to try to shrink that distance between the two. Okay, so you come up and you have a 80 mile an hour exit speed one time, but the most time you live around 50. Well, one's very good, go for it. But if you're living at 50, then we got to find a way to get you to close that gap so that we don't have so much area in there to where you're mishitting things a lot of times. What we want to try to do is that we understand that if we can keep you in that certain area, then you have a lot of grace, which means I don't have to always be on time, but if I can make sure I hit it at this exit speed in this area, I have a better chance of being successful. So what are our kids looking for? They want to hit that big ball, but they also want to see how long they can be successful for a long period of time. So if we can get them living in that range, now all of a sudden we started seeing their success rate go up, which in turn, when they're successful, they're happier. When they're happier, they work harder. When they work harder, they get more success. So we're trying to get them to understand and seeing the process and seeing the outcomes from it. So we give them a range to go from. We also want to know that too, if we can live in this area, certain degrees of launch angle and everything else, since they're talking about it. I mean, we were watching the World Series and one of the closers for the Yankees came in and they said he gave up the lowest amount of exit velocity that anybody on the Yankee staff. Well, if kids are hearing that more often on television or in games, or even when they're watching our World Series during our games and on the great jobs they do commentating for our games during the week, if they're hearing that data, then our kids are, okay, how do I make that relevant to what I do? Okay, so if I'm out here working every day on our field, how can I make that relevant? Well, here's how you make it relevant. You try to live in these numbers in this area. Now, does that work for everyone? Some people aren't number people and they say, just let me hit it. I want to feel like it feels good off the bat. And the other kids are like, I want to know, how close am I getting to that number? So the more often they get to that number, then they start seeing their average and things starting to grow up.
So once we know, for us, we know exactly what plays at Tiger Park, right? Our place plays a little bigger. And then from there, if you can hit the ball at 25 degrees at 65 miles an hour, that's going to get out at a lot of places. It might get knocked down at our place because of some wind, but great, you hit a double, right? So like we know what plays here in this space. So this over here on the far left is kind of like our numbers based on what we know. And so this is what we use in the cage. Like if we were in the cage and you didn't have a flight scope to measure every single ball that's hit, well, now you know, if you know that at your place a ball at 30 degrees, that's what gets out for you, and that's what you're trying to train. That's what you're trying to train. Then we would take a string that you see right here, and we would run this string at the cage at 14 feet, and we would go straight up. And I gave you a little graphic down here that kind of shows you for us what we're trying to do all the time. So we took the numbers and we kind of put them together. For us, we know the sweet spot is anywhere between 15 degrees to 25 degrees. Now, for some of our kids, like we have some big, strong power kids who sometimes want to cut stuff too much. Like for Georgia Clark, if we try and train Georgia at 25 degrees all the time, when she has adrenaline and gets in the game, then all of a sudden her 25 degrees becomes 40, right? So for G, we try and get G to live at 15 in the cage, right? But then we have some other kids like Allie Newland who needs to be like in that little sweet spot, perfect space all the time. If she trains at 15 degrees, then she's going to hit a crap ton of line drives, which is great, but she can hit the ball out too. So then we try and get Allie to train a little higher. So we'll run the cables up the side of this cage and across. And that kind of gives us a really good idea of like, if you're living in this space off the bat, then that means you're doing some really good things. Now, I can live in this space and hit the ball really slow, and that doesn't help me. But I got to live in this space and hit the ball as firmly as I can all the time. The other thing that sometimes we'll do, we haven't done it in a few years because we had a crap ton of hitters because of COVID, but we'll probably be back in that space sometime soon. We know the height from either of our camera wells. Okay, so from either of our camera wells, it's exactly 17 feet. So it worked out perfect for us. Like I know exactly where to tie it. And we'll take these flags and we'll string the flag straight across the field, or a string with some tape tied to it, or whatever you want. And it's like on a drop ball day, like Howard's out on the field hitting with the hitters, and he'll be like, okay, I want you to hit every drop ball into these flags. Now, are they going to hit it? Probably not. But when they do, they get really freaking pumped. But it just gives them an idea that it lets my body kind of self-organize. If I'm trying to live down there and I got to make sure I got to hit it up at that angle, then I'm going to let my body do what it's supposed to do. So we're not getting dumpy. We're not training launch angle in this big, huge way. We're saying, these are the numbers that I need to live at. I know I need to hit it in this space. Here's an idea of what that looks like. And we can do that with those strings. You could do it with big, huge catch nets if you had them. Those are really expensive, so you might not. Or we could run the strings in the cage.
So like if you look at the picture on the left with the string going up the cage, we actually put a purple rope all the way up the side of the cage. And what it did was change our coaching too, because I came from the old school where everything you hit, you want to hit the back of the net. You want nothing hit the roof. You always told your kids, hey, let's stay off the roof. Anything you hit, live off the roof. Well, it started happening the more we did the angle that we wanted to have them get to was right above my head. Well, now I'm mad at kids or getting on kids for hitting the roof. Well, now actually I want you to hit the roof. I want you to hit the roof, but I want you to hit it hard. So anything now from this line back is okay. Anything forward is just a fly ball. So we started training a little different as our coaching wise. So it gave myself a different spot to look for instead of me saying, okay, the roof, don't live on the roof. Well, no, live on the roof from here back. The other thing is that we talk about too, most people want to hit that hard ground ball, hard line drive, which is great. We want to do it. But we also started to find out that we have to be really, really lucky. Because if we start hitting ground balls and hitting line drives at 10 degrees, now I'm hoping it goes between someone. I'm hoping that someone misses it, or a defensive player is out of position, or I'm hoping to hit it in some kind of hole. Whereas if I can get that 15-degree enough up, I can get it over their heads and it drops in front of the outfield. So now all of a sudden, instead of us just having to live on luck alone, now we're able to be actually a philosophy where we can hit and actually do some damage with it without just trying to be lucky.
I think as we get into talking about bat speed too, I think something that we found over the last couple of years is, yes, I want you to swing as fast as possible, but like I'm not the most fleet of foot. My specialty was turning triples into doubles. So there's like, I have a top that if I try and swing over that top, then like of bat speed, then what happens to me is my swing gets really out of whack. Like I'm never going to move like Aaliyah Andrews is going to move, right? Like we're not the same. So like for me, my bat speed number might be a little bit lower and my rotational acceleration number might be a little bit higher because I'm trying to move instantly in an impact and like move in that space. Whereas like somebody who's going to be like a faster, handsier type hitter, their bat speed number, we might expect it to be super, super high. And their rotational acceleration number might be a little less, meaning that like, even if they make an early decision, they're still fast enough to get something off of them. So like, it's kind of like a sliding scale. So while bat speed matters, it's not the end all be all, but it does have the highest like correlation to exit velocity. So like you can read through this and I'm sure I'll send it to you if you want it, whatever. But like the biggest things about bat speed of your batted ball, like what makes it go the furthest is going to be bat speed, the mass of your bat, which if you're a youth coach on here, quit letting your kids that are freaking 17 years old swing drop tens. Like it's not helping them. Just because they swing it fast doesn't mean the ball goes further. Mass times force equals acceleration, right? Like, so let's really let's get them into some heavier things the sooner that we can. It helps them in the long run. Or when they get to us, they think we're really mean because we make them swing heavy things. So mass of your bat matters. Obviously the pitch speed matters. And then your collision efficiency. And that's going to come from your blast metrics. And we probably won't get there in these slides, but like the smoother and cleaner things are, the better you turn things, obviously, then you collide with the ball more efficiently. And then like the way that we're going to do that most often is by increasing our bat speed, right? And then by increasing our rotational acceleration, which if you don't know blast, that's like the number that is like the telling, like it tells everything. Like if I'm, Howard uses a really good analogy about driving a Volkswagen or a Porsche, like, and it makes so much sense. Like when I hammer my foot on the gas pedal, I want it to go instantly. Like I want it to like happen. I want to be able to wait as long as I can and then let it go instead of having to like guess and slow down as I'm getting to something. So that comes into play here. But when in doubt, like bat speed is the cleanest and easiest way to increase exit velocity.
And we have to be able to have the bat speed under control. Like anyone can have bat speed and really swing it really hard if their body's going out of whack. We want to be able to make sure how fast can you go and still be in control of it. Now, we're going to have a lot of these numbers, and whenever she passes out this the data to you, we also understand too is that data goes only so far. You still have to hit. Right? There's a spot where the kids can have overload with data, but you can still play into numbers, but you still have to hit. You still have to put eyes and see it and put the barrel to the ball. What we're going to try to do is how can we make the most efficient and quickest way to get to the ball, and then using the data to go with it. So what we started doing too, we started training with speed sticks. We were trying to see, this is our first semester to actually use them, our first fall. And we took a group of kids, about 6 or 8 kids. We wanted to try and see what we could do bat speed wise, if we could increase it and how much time it would take. So we took a training, the bat speed stick from Super Slugger, and did their actual workouts. And what we did was we took individual players and they had to swing it right-handed and left-handed, which I thought was kind of crazy because I'm right-handed and I do nothing left-handed. Like I don't try to eat left-handed. I do nothing with my opposite hand because I would hurt myself. But what we started seeing is that the kids who swing with their correct side, using the other side, it helps them it helps them create breaks. It makes them stop sooner. How can their body work efficiently around it, the spine and the scap and everything else? It makes that weaker side stronger to where it gets stopped, where it can accelerate through. We started knowing that when your body can't move, one part fires, it has to stop before the next part can fire. Then the next part can fire. Well, if those spots are loose in between, then the opposite side helps connect that together. So if you look and see how we have it listed on the left, this was the first week 1. We took a bat and we did a test on radar. Now the radar you can see in front of the kids swinging is just a golf radar that we bought for about $100 off Amazon. And all it does, it reads the swing for a club head. We got to make sure that radar is even with the zone you're swinging in. But other than that, it's not a very expensive toy. It's just a golf radar we did. So we made them swing a real bat before, and then they have to do the different swings styles and test each one, right-handed and left-handed. Now, all we're looking for is for them to give them a spot and try to stay in that zone. What I didn't want them to do is swing at hard as they could one time and then go halfway the next 3 drills. Because now I want to try to replicate that same speed every time, because now we're going hard. And then by the end of the week, they're going to test after. So you can see at this player here, before her bat speed was at 74, by the end of the week, she swung at 76. So we started seeing how her bat speeds increased during the week. So now we're in like different levels as we go. These are some of the drills you can see that they're doing with these different speed sticks.
When we first started training with the speed sticks, I just like was thinking old school that they were going to be all overloaded, and actually they're underloaded. And so like, you know, back in the day, you'd put the big, huge donut on your bat and you'd swing it on deck and you do all the things. And there's a space for that. There's definitely a space to swing heavy things. But realistically, oh, darn. Back. Realistically, like, we never want to train our central nervous system to slow down. And by swinging heavy things a lot, all of a sudden we start to move slower. So a lot of these things are lighter, which is like, it makes so much sense now that I think about it and I think about how the body really functions. Both of these players are left-handed. I hope that you could notice that right away.
Please God, please don't
but you see, like this one, Allie is swinging right-handed here. And it's like from a stretch, ready to go, like whatever. She swings the first one at 67. Now watch how pumped she gets about this one. She swings it and it's 74. And she is like fired up, right? So she just swung at 74 from her right side, and she's a left-handed hitter. So what we find all the time is your kids that are right-handed throwers, left-handed hitters, their bat speeds and their rotational acceleration numbers are so much higher just from the start before you start training things, because they understand deceleration on both sides of your body. So that's why this makes so much sense in that space. There's so many ways to train bat speed. This was just the way that we thought that, like, they don't need a coach to do it. You can give them the drills and you can walk away and go do something else. And it just allows them to like really see some results. Now, what we've noticed is we have 2 kids right now that have been doing the bat speed program. And currently right now in all of our scrimmages and our fall games, they're leading the team in exit velocity. So it seems to correlate, right? It has to go together. Like our one kid that's leading everyone in exit velocity and home runs, the difference in her exit velos right now are literally like 8 to 10 miles an hour. Of an average compared to what it was at this time last year. And that's phenomenal. And so like, I think this obviously their swings are getting cleaned up. There's so many things that go into it, but it's just something that seems to really be making sense. This is all the stuff about blast that we probably don't really have time for. So if you want to know about it and you don't, just call me and I'll shoot you this and we'll go from there. So Joanna, back to you. If anybody's got questions, have at it.
Whew. Who took a breath? Anybody? I love it. That's why I love when you guys do this. It's so much fun, so exciting. And I'm sure we're going to have questions for you at the end. So hang on to those. If you have questions for Howard and Lindsay, we will get to those. But we're going to keep rolling. We have Rachel Folden coming up next. Coach Folden is going to go through all kinds of things with us as well. So we will get her queued up here.
Hello, everyone. Let me see, share my screen. So can everybody hear me and see what I got? Okay, awesome. So basically my goal today with everybody, very good content that we just heard, which has been awesome, is just basically to teach you like my method of collecting data and making it applicable. Right. So you have data for a lot of you, you've dabbled in maybe a blast sensor. Maybe you have the luxury of having something more complex like a Rapsodo or a hit tracks or anything. Even old school statistical data is still data. Okay. So when you're looking at things like batting average, slugging percentage, on base percentage, that's all data and that's all useful as long as we know what to do with it. So I made this little presentation on basically my method of how I go about making data applicable. Okay, so we'll start by application, right? So the number one reason that most people scoff at data and technology is because they don't know what to do with it. Okay, you're going to hear a lot of people that poo-poo on data and poo-poo on tech because, oh, that's not how I used to do it. The reality is they don't know what to do with it, so they're not even going to try. And it does seem daunting at first to want to, get involved with this kind of stuff because it requires a lot of work and extra work and work that a lot of us don't think we have time for. But data does a good thing and it holds us accountable, right? It doesn't lie, it's objective. We're now on the hook to figure some stuff out, right? And that means, okay, so we bought the product and now we paid for it, so we might as well get our money's worth for it, right? So I think that's a big reason why a lot of people don't want to start, is because they don't want to be held accountable to actually using and figuring out how to use the product, right? So step one is collection, right? And this, I put levels on these so you know where the easy, the intermediate, and the hard are. So the first thing you got to do whenever you buy something is figure out how to use it. Okay, so you figure out how to use a blast sensor, you figure out how to go to the website that go to Game Changer and sift through statistics. You figure out how to use whatever product it is that you're, or whatever medium that you want to use. Getting familiar with it is probably the first step that I would say everyone needs to do, but then also you need to figure out what you are trying to do with it to establish a baseline. So very similar to like the scientific method, right? Is first you got to have a question, and then you have to figure out a test that answers that question, hopefully, right? So if you're just kind of buying it and just saying, well, let's see what the numbers say, well, you're not really, you got to be chasing something. So you got to have a goal, right? So establish a baseline, something that you can test against later. So going back to the presentation before us, if your goal is more bat speed, then find something that measures bat speed and establish a baseline, like Coach Lindsay was saying, which is, you know, I have a player who has improved in 6 months by 8 miles per hour. That's great, but we don't know that unless we have something to test against. Okay. So the second part, and this is the intermediate part only because it's time consuming. So after you've established your baseline and after you have all this data, now you got to sort it, collate it, and organize it. Right. And this is time consuming and a part that a lot of people don't want to do. And it also taps into a skill set that not a lot of people have. Right. Outsource this part. Right. If someone's got good Excel or Google Sheets skills, outsource this to them and say, hey, would you mind putting together this project for me? Especially if you coach at a college or at a high school, I'm sure you can find a student that has some skills that would love to do some of this for you, especially if they get to be involved with an athletic team. The key here is make sure something is organized and sortable. So if I have an Excel spreadsheet and it's got all of my players' names and it has all of their numbers on it, you know, all of their early connection numbers, spin rate off of Rapsodo, exit velocity, everything you have, I want to make that sortable so that I can just sift between each one of those metrics. Okay. And then a lot of times these, like if you have Blast, they do this for you. Okay, depending on what level of the product you have. If you have Game Changer, a lot of times it does this for you. You can sort things pretty easily. And so many times what we run into, especially on, you know, some of the higher dollar teams that I've worked for, is we'll have multiple mediums for technology. And this one has its own little software and this one has its own little software. And sometimes we have to make sure that we can meld those two together in an organized manner, which does take time. Okay. The next step is interpreting. So the first thing I would do here is to figure out what good is, okay? And it's very, very important that we only are measuring what we treasure so that we don't waste time. So for example, I use Blast all the time, but there's certain metrics on there that I just never use because I don't treasure them. I don't give any value to them. So I'm not going to waste my time trying to figure out what good is. I'm just going to go towards what I like and what I'm good at. And knowing your skill set as a coach really comes into play here, right? So also understand too, when you look at data like this, good is often a range and it's not always a number. I'll give you a good example of this for those of you that use Blast and are familiar with the rotational acceleration number. Rotational acceleration, there is a cap on it. So there's kind of a bottom threshold and there's where it becomes too much. And now my bat is turning too fast and not shifting into a linear path. Typically we want to see something that's, and this is at the pro baseball level. We want to see something that's over 15 Gs, but under 25 Gs. Once it gets over 25 Gs, the swing becomes very east and west. So there's often, that's just one example. There's oftentimes some ranges, right? It's like telling somebody they need to lose weight to get into shape. Obviously you don't want them to get so skinny that not obviously now it's counterproductive, right? There's always a range that you kind of want to keep them in. And I kind of like in data to that too. There's oftentimes things that are ranges. And this is the point where you have to call your friends, use Google, communicate with customer service. If you bought something, use the heck out of their customer service. Okay. I'm on the phone all the time with people who make these products that I use because I need to know how to use it and I need it to work. Okay. Because if this stuff doesn't work, what happens? We just stop using it and then it collects dust and then it becomes a $3,000 paperweight sitting in a bucket somewhere, right? We don't want that to happen. Okay, then step 4, and this is my favorite part. Okay, so after we have kind of determined what good is, we've determined what we want to chase, we've determined, we've got all this data, we've got it organized. Now I want to find the lowest hanging fruit. Okay, where can I make the most immediate impact? So I look at, and I'll give you an example of something that we do as on the consulting side, is we use force plates, we use a KVS to measure rotational sequence, we use blast to measure what the bat is doing, we use hit tracks or Rapsodo to measure what the ball is doing, and we use video. All of those things are pieces of the story, but I always go back to what is the lowest hanging fruit? What is the easiest thing I can clean up that will help everything else get better? And let's start there. And the reason I say that is because the last thing you want to do is just blow somebody up and take what they're good at away from them, just because you didn't really attack the lowest hanging fruit first. So start there. So what are the holes in a program that you need to improve as a whole? Maybe you look at statistics and you're like, dang, we strike out too much. How do I decrease strikeouts? Right? That's a general thing that would scale. And then it's about figuring out how to improve that specific metric. What needs to be improved on individually as well as a team. Okay. And remember, you don't need to fix all of it. Good players are deficient in a few things. Okay. Then this is the hardest part, is the experimentation. Okay. So once you've identified what you got, once you have figured out what good is, once you've figured out what the lowest hanging fruit is, okay, now how do I train it? Okay. And this is where trial and error becomes so important. And this is the most important part of my talk today, is we as coaches expect our players to understand how to deal with failure, understand how to move past it. But we as coaches are never willing to fail in front of them. And that needs to change. We have to lead from the top and show them that, hey, I don't have all the answers. Here's what I do know. You are deficient in this. So here's a drill package I came up with, and I want you to try this. And we're going to give it some time and we're going to see if it works to correct this problem. Okay. So you're going to have to be okay with proving yourself wrong, and you're going to have to be okay with giving this step time. Okay. We are not magicians. Okay. I gave lessons for a long time and I thought I could solve every problem in 30 minutes. And that's just not how it works. Look at the numbers that I put down here. You got to give stuff at least 3 weeks, ideally at least 6 weeks, to see real sustainable change when you're trying to make a change. If you are waiting for games to tell you, you're probably going to need to give each player 50 at-bats. 50 at-bats. For some of you, that's an entire fall travel ball season, is 50 at-bats. And you got to be okay with taking that and saying, I don't need to be successful. I'm in an experimental phase and I need to see if it works. Okay. Especially when you're dealing with 14, 15, 16-year-olds. Who cares? We don't care if they're all-stars or all-Americans at that age, if we think that what we're doing is meaningful, right? Give them some time to actually show you that they can change, right? And then after this, we go to remeasure. So we've got our baseline. So now let's retest and see if it works. Run them through the same tests you did before. Okay. Stay open-minded. Some players are going to improve. Some players won't. And if you're a good coach, the ones that won't are going to keep you up at night. Right? Then you go to step 7, repeat steps 5 and 6. So again, this is back to hard. What you're going to end up doing is you're going to add and subtract drills from player plans. Write your stuff down. This is what I've done. This is what I haven't done yet. And just rinse and repeat. Okay. And what you're going to end up doing, and I know we did this a lot in the Cubs organization, is we're going to end up getting really good at training specific metrics with like a specific drill package. We're going to figure out what are the most universal that work for everybody, right? And those are the drills that you're going to scale to your entire team, right? So then think about this. Now you can go recruiting and you could find somebody that no one else values, that's got a ugly, funky swing, but you're like, I know how to train that. And now I can recruit that player to my team, and they actually have some other things that I really, really like. And now I'm going to give them a chance to be a pretty good player because I know how to train that. Why? Because I've tried it. I failed. I've tried it, I failed, and I've honed my process down to where now I can actually go and look for that in players. Okay. And the cool part is the more you get, the more you do this process, the better you get. Okay. So here's some pro tips, right? Again, failure is part of your process. And the goal is to create an environment that you see 75% of your players get better. Okay. I said 75% for a reason. You're not going to help everybody. Okay. As a coach, you're just going to have to accept that you're not going to help everybody. Sometimes it's on them. Sometimes it's on us. Sometimes we just get it wrong. Okay. And that's just how it's going to happen. But if 75% of your players are consistently getting better with this process, then you know you have a good process, right? Collaboration is key. I am a big believer in showing your work. Okay. I am not the coach that's like, ooh, don't give the players any of the information because I don't want them to be overloaded with information. No, involve them in the process. You're going to have to use your feel, and you're going to have to say, hey, listen, this is too much information for this player, and you're going to have to finesse it a little bit. But I do think that they should be involved in their process. We all want players that are bought in, but we don't want to give them a chance to buy in sometimes. We got to involve them. Okay. Show them your work. Prove it to them. Be okay with showing them something and saying, hey, dude, we tried X, Y, and Z, and it didn't work. Right? Be okay with that. Okay. You don't need to know it all. You don't need to have all the answers. You're going to build some really strong relationships with your players if you go through this process, because they're going to know that you went to work for them. Right? My coach may not have all the answers, but damn it, they worked. They worked to find it, and we tried to figure it out together. Okay. And experimentation is fun. Players love testing day. Okay. Anybody who has a hit tracks knows how much players like to try to compete and beat their previous exit velocities, right? Anybody with a radar gun knows that a pitcher's trying to throw harder every single time. Okay. Players love testing day. So don't scoff at like, oh, I've got to take a whole day out from training to have a testing day. No, that's part of the process. That's how you hone in the next training cycle that you're going to take them through. And the last piece I have in here is just make time. You have time. I promise you, you have time. You just have to make it. Okay. It's just like anything else. You have to be willing to reorganize and do some things differently and take from other parts of practice to implement this at times. Okay. You are going to, testing takes long. Sometimes it takes a really long time. It could take all day to test your entire team. But if you do it right, it's only one day. And now the next days, I'm actually going to target their practice better and get them better much faster, right? The old way of doing things does work. I just do think that there's a better way and we can get there faster, especially if we use these tools. That's all data is. It's just a tool, right? It just helps make us better as coaches, because now we can actually target what we need to get better, and we can get players better faster. And the last slide is just, if anyone wants to contact me, feel free to reach out. I'm available and I answer most of the questions, sometimes not right away, but I promise I get to all of them at some point. So if anyone wants to get a hold of me, here is all of the info that you need. For those of you that like the social media, that's all of the handles that I will respond through. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. If anyone has any questions, please feel free.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate that. And glad to have you with us as well. And we will get to questions, I promise. But I know there's so much information that we're taking it all in, because I don't even have any questions in the chat right now. I think everybody is probably still, hanging rope in their batting cage or whatever they're doing right now. But we will keep rolling. We have Coach Cameron coming up from Florida State. Troy, you are on whenever you're ready. You can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you for multiple reasons. Up until this point, I think I've been known as that new guy, or who was the guy that Lonnie hired to take Craig's spot. So now I can go by, oh, that's the guy that Lonnie hired. So I appreciate you introducing me to the softball world. So yeah, a lot of good stuff on here. Obviously, data, you can go in so many different directions. Let me go ahead and just open this up real quick. Sorry, I was taking a look. Yeah, we specialize, or we focus a little bit more on in-game data than we do on a lot of stuff, but the in-game data we're able to do on the field in practice as well. So we're able to take the in-game data, the practice data, marry the two and really kind of see if we're able to take swings from BP or our bullpens and take that and right into the game and have the same type of output. So let me get this going. Hold on, sorry. This is all right. It will not open up, but we'll just do it. Okay. We use Yakrtech for our in-game system. I know we've heard a lot about FlightScope. Not here to really distinguish the difference between the two. I do know FlightScope is a Doppler radar system. Yakrtech is an optical. Basically, optical systems are a bunch of cameras that take a bunch of pictures and compute the data off of the pictures, where FlightScope is just a radar system. So Lindsay and Howard, I know you guys are getting a Yakrtech here soon. I think you guys will love it. I have a FlightScope in my office. If anybody wants to buy it, I'm not using it. You can, I'd be more than happy. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we used FlightScope for a while. I actually was introduced to FlightScope back when I was doing baseball. I come from the baseball world, so data and analytics has been in baseball for quite some time, and obviously longer than it has been in softball. So we've been extremely happy with Yakrtech so far. We use Yakrtech to collect the data, and then we use Softball Cloud, which you see here on the screen, to basically we take the CSV files, we upload it into Softball Cloud, and then Softball Cloud makes use of it, puts it into all different kinds of graphs and heat maps and spray charts and all that fun stuff, so that we don't have to have somebody really smart make a bunch of different bar graphs and all that stuff as well. So it kind of does it for us. So I'm going to come down to this next slide here. So, I mean, right, data in softball, like why did we not have pitch speeds for the College World Series last year? I think some of you guys too on your broadcast have gone in and out with, I know we have with the ACC, sometimes there'll be velocities on there, sometimes they won't, sometimes the velocities seem like they're pretty far off, but nonetheless, we're trying to get there in the softball space. We're trying to make sure that we're taking those steps, but this is just a little kind of snapshot here with Yakrtech. There was 5 systems in softball last year. There was 200 in baseball. We have 275 games of data. So as we sit here in the softball space and we're trying to get used to using data and analytics and what do the numbers mean and what can we use it for, we're still as a whole, the industry, in a data collection phase so that we can start really making use of a lot of this information as well. So how do I get to this next one? Sorry. Whoa. As you can tell, I'm talking about data and I don't even know how to use it. Here from all that data that was collected last year, once again, I'll be more than happy to share this stuff and give it and send it in an email form. But this is just some very basic data off those 5 machines from last year that just gives some basic stuff. So this is stuff that's probably going to help with some recruiting down the line. Also going to help with parents being a little bit more realistic, you know, with their kids' abilities and where they're at. And it's gonna be able to help us as coaches when it comes to recruiting, to be able to like let them know, like, hey, this isn't feelings. I think your kid's a great player, but they're just not at this level, and the numbers kind of show that. So that was kind of my title for this whole thing. It's not my feelings, it's just numbers. So here's just some of the stuff that was collected last year over the course of the season. Once again, this is all stuff that Softball Cloud does with having heat maps and things like that, which I'll show you on our system. Like Howard and Lindsay were talking about earlier, having some exit velocities, some launch angles. One of the things that we really focus in on is exit velocity. We don't get too much wrapped up into the launch angle. What we have found that anything 64 miles an hour and harder on exit velo in game is when the damage starts to occur. Anything under 64 miles an hour, you're still going to hit your doubles, still going to get your triples, but the uptick in terms of damage being done seems to be right at about that 64-mile-an-hour number. We had a game last week that we had 20 balls hit that were 64 miles an hour and harder, and 15 of the 20 were went for base hits. So you're talking about a 750 batting average with 64 miles an hour or harder off the bat in games. So we will have our Yacker Tech running during BP. We're able to mirror onto our video board during practice. So we're able to take a swing, hit a ball, get instant feedback right there on the video board. And it's just one of the ways that we're using it right now for teaching. Obviously, we do a lot of the mechanical stuff in the cages, but when we get out on the field and we start letting it rip, that's giving instant feedback. Coach Rolani will do a lot of bullpens out on the field because the Yacker system's a stadium unit. There's 2 cameras above our third base dugout. It's not a portable unit. So that allows us to get out there, throw a bullpen on the field, get the data, and then obviously when we get into game, we get to see if the data is changing at all or if we're being consistent with a batter in there. So let's go down here. Last year, a guy in college baseball hit 105.5 for Tennessee. That was on one of these Yacker Tech machines. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. I mean, like I said, we can go down so many rabbit holes with this stuff, and the ability that Softball Cloud that we use, and also the Yacker Tech data that's collected. Talk about different grips. You can talk about how you're getting spin efficiency. I'm not a pitching guy. I leave that to Lonnie, so I'm not even going to bother getting into all the stuff in terms of efficiency and rotation and spin rate and induced break, all that stuff. So obviously umpires here, it's coming down the pipeline. I know we have the ability to give the umpires a report when the game is over in terms of what strikes they called that were out of the zone, what balls were in the zone that they called balls instead of strikes. So we're able to give them an actual umpire's report based on how they did during the game as well. Catching, obviously, this goes to being able to our catchers getting balls called strikes. So there's so many different rabbit holes. Once again, broadcasting, being able to start putting some of this data up onto a broadcast during a game is pretty awesome too. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and read all this stuff. It's basically stating, softball is a little bit behind in the data collecting phase. So we're still trying to figure some of this stuff out. I know last year, like the slide said, there was 5 schools that had Yacker Tech. We were one of them. I believe now there are 9 schools that have Yacker Tech installed, and there are 11 schools that are on the way to getting it installed in January. Like I said, Howard and Lindsay are getting one installed there at their facility. So we use it for a lot of different reasons, but the main reason we use it is to see if we can marry our practice numbers to our game numbers and then kind of go from there. We do have one of the pocket radar machines that it's not the handheld one. They've actually got a bigger pocket radar that we have mounted on the wall inside the batting cages. We use that for consistency. I got somebody like Kaylee Mudge who doesn't hit the ball as hard as Michaela Edenfield, and I don't need Kaylee Mudge to hit the ball as Michaela Edenfield, but I do need Kaylee Mudge. If her exit velocity in a cage off of tee or off front toss is 65 miles an hour, I need her to hit that as much as she can for that consistency. If she can repeat swings when it comes game time with the velocity of the pitcher, that exit velocity is going to tick up, obviously, with the output from the pitcher. So if we can repeat swings, somebody like Kaylee Mudge who can really repeat a swing and get consistent barrel contact, she doesn't need to hit it as hard as Michaela Edenfield. I mean, Michaela Edenfield hit one the other day against a team we were playing, and Travis and I joked that we think the shortstop jumped to try to catch it, and it was 88 miles an hour off the bat, and it didn't get much higher than 15 feet, and it went out in the road somewhere. So like, you're going to have different types of hitters. Can you train to their I guess their abilities of what they do well? And data just gives you a chance to really show them, hey, this is what you do well. It's not my opinion, but let's really work hard on this and really focus in on getting better at it. And the more we can do it, then obviously the better chances we have of being successful at it. So
thank you very much, Coach. Appreciate that. And that's the name of the game, right? We want to hit it where they're not, or hit it hard. And I know we have some questions here from a few people. So if you have a question that you have not submitted yet, feel free to put that in the chat. We're going to go ahead and just kind of rapid fire at some of our people. Howard, Lindsay, let's come back to you to start, because there's a question we have about at what stages do you start to integrate the use of technology, and what age? And I know, Howard, you have a son who's getting ready to go into college here in a year or so. And, Lindsay, you got some 8U softball talent you're working with as well. So how do you decide when you start introducing technology to what age?
I think we started using, when Trip was about 12, 13, we started using the blast on him. And we only, like Rachel said, we only did a few of the metrics that we were interested in. We didn't do the whole plethora of them. And because I didn't want him trying to match every one of them and then get his swing off. We knew that, okay, we want to see your own playing efficiency and see what your bat speed was. And as you got stronger, how much faster could he swing it under control? So we gave him a few little technology. He was about 12 or 13 when we started, but we didn't do a lot with it. We just gave him a couple things to do, not the whole plethora of all of them.
Yeah. And then I think, with our little ones, like Beth's, I'm coaching the 10 and under mud bugs. If anybody wants to say prayers for me, they're Beth's little ones, and David DeLucci and some Todd Harris, some people like that in town that are pretty good at baseball. Somehow I'm coaching the team. I don't understand. I missed practice tonight for this, so you guys are welcome. But for us, from a technology perspective, we haven't really done a ton yet. We just want them to hit the ball forward, and we want them to hit it really hard. So we just try and use more cues of what they're trying to do with their bodies. Like, hey, right now as you're hitting this front toss, try and hit it over my screen. Or right now as you're hitting this live pitching, I need you to do whatever. So it just helps us kind of work back to some, to them letting themselves organize a little bit. And I think that's something that I can brag on Howard. I think that's something he did such a cool job with Trip. Some things when Trip was little, he would send him to me, and I would do stuff with him because Howard didn't want to be the one that was always coaching him. But then he didn't really start to really talk about mechanics until Trip was 12, 13, 14. But from 11 down, they just worked on hitting the ball as hard as they can. They hit as often as possible. How many times can I square things up? And I think you totally see that in Trip's development. He loves hitting because he just wanted to come hang out with dad, and he made it fun. And he didn't get bogged down in the minutia of the data and all the things. I think you could do some really cool things, but I think hitting still has to be fun too.
I figured I had plenty of time to screen him up later.
Excellent. Thank you very much. There is a question in the chat about some virtual reality, and I was texting a little bit with our panelists, and I think Coach Folden is the only one who uses the WIN or the virtual reality, the Oculus stuff. And I know that there's some difficulties sometimes in getting the video to be right, front facing and some of those things. So just a heads up on that. Coach Folden said to reach out to her if you would like, but that it's been difficult for her to use for multiple teams, but with one team, they were able to use that pretty effectively. So feel free to reach out to her. She did need to jump off of this question part, but if you have any questions on that, you most certainly can reach out. I do not have any feedback from other panelists in the chat here that they're using it. So just a heads up on that. Also, another question in the chat on the range of length and weight drops with the bats that you're using based on age. So I know that there's some content going back and forth in the chat, both privately and in the group. But if you are willing, panelists, if you just throw that in there, what's a typical bat selection look like? And then I guess, Troy, let's come to you. How do you, I know you probably get the question a lot at camps, how do you help campers or incoming student athletes determine what length and weight bat they should be using?
It's funny you say that because we have a lot that swing drop 8s and drop 9s, but I'm in the process of doing a little bit of a kind of like a study off of the tee, just having them kind of basically try out all the drop 8, drop 9, drop 10, and collecting that data and just kind of seeing what the output is. Like is going from a drop 8 to a drop 10 gonna have a huge drop off in terms of exit velocity? I don't know. So I think it comes down to specifically the hitter. What do they have the best chance of barreling the ball up more often? I mean, a drop 8 sounds great because you've got some mass behind it, and if you hit it, you got a pretty good chance of it going. But I'd like to hit it a little bit more often too. So it's kind of up in the air. It's subjective. I think it's up to the hitter. I know Michaela Edenfield, I know I brought her up earlier. She's 6'1", 220 pounds and strong as an ox, and she swings a drop 9. And then we've got some of the smaller players on our teams swinging drop 8s, swinging a heavier bat. So it is kind of subjective to the player, but I'm in the process of trying to figure that out. I want to see if I can get some numbers and maybe help them kind of pick a better bat based on numbers, data like we're talking about. So yeah, we're in the process of that, but we do have a lot that swing drop 8s.
There's a really cool thing that they're doing over at the Baseball Performance Lab here in town. It's funded through Marucci, so that's kind of how it exists. But basically, they're doing exactly what they're doing for baseball. They're trying to figure out how to do it for us. The reason that it's a little bit harder for us is because for some of us, especially those that are in bat contracts, you might only have 2 options. Like for us, we have a Xeno or we have an LXT, and now we have the Meta. If we don't have a one piece, for people that have a one piece, it's an option too. But they really look at like your strength levels, like they do some power and core testing. They do some different things like that. And then you swing all of the bats that they have in all of the different ranges off of the same pitching machine over and over again. And you get this whole number. It's like, 1.5, whatever. And like the higher the whole number, that's obviously the bat that they think you should be swinging. And when we went out and tested, it was phenomenal, the difference. Like we have one kid who like emotionally is really attached to a 34 drop 9, big, huge, strong kid, doesn't want to change. We put her in a 34 drop 8 when we were testing out at Marucci, and her distance increased almost by 8 feet on every ball. Like 8 feet, like that's massive, right? But because she's so emotionally attached to this bat, like we can't get her to move out of it, even though she'll see better outcomes, right? And so like you have to be really like strategic on how you get them to change, because they're like super nervous about swinging it slow or not being good at it, or this is what I've always swung. And so I think I'm with Troy, you got to do some testing and really have some data to like put in front of them, because they don't want to, like, at all.
Yeah, and some of it had to do with the testing came down to grip strength. So some of the kids that wanted to swing, like we would like to put them into a drop 8, but grip strength wise, they can't handle a drop 8 because they can't hang on to it. So a drop 9 fits them better. They're more comfortable with it. So if we can increase their grip strength, now we can increase their bat strength with the mass as it goes. Example, it gave it to my son. He likes to swing this certain bat because of the fact that he's stronger, but his hands can't hold it. So he has to be able to break somewhere. Something has to give. And so that he has to swing this type of bat because that's what feels comfortable in his hands, because he can't stop the other one.
Thanks, guys. Question for everybody, and this, we hit on it a little bit through some different presentations, but if you were picking one, if you are a coach and you are just getting started in the technology space and budget considered, right, it's probably not going to be the architect that you pick for choice number 1, but if you were picking one thing to start with your team, what piece of technology and or what metric would you start with that you find to be really important? Coach Tarr, you want to take this one first?
Yes, just like basic, you're talking just basic technology, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I think definitely this sounds super basic. I mean, the blast is good, but I think if you don't want to get into the weeds with that, I think just even a general like Google Drive and save the gal's swings in like a folder structure, folder system, so that they have, just archives personally of their own development, visual development, whether that be swings or, any other kind of like fundamental part of the game.
Thank you, Coach. Troy, how about you? Where would you start?
I'd probably start with a pocket radar. I feel like you can get both sides of the ball with the pocket radar in terms of pitching and also hitting. I think too, I want to say Stalker radar guns came out with a version that gets spin rate and all that, vertical break, all that stuff too. But that'll lead down some rabbit holes if you're just kind of getting started in the data and tech world. So I'd have to say pocket radar will allow you to kind of dabble on both sides of the ball and kind of get your feet wet.
Thank you. LSU duo, what you got? What would you start with?
We were with Troy on radars for sure. I think radars and stopwatches, right? Like there's so many things that you can do with a stopwatch. Like we know realistically, if you hit a ball in the outfield and they're throwing one base ahead, we want them to throw it. We want them to catch it on the ground and throw them to second in 5.4, right? 5.4 seconds. And we put them on the stopwatch. We have a big, huge stopwatch that like you can click the button. It's like a swimming timer, and like so that everyone can see it and they know that I'm not just cheating based on what I'm saying on the stopwatch, right? But it kind of gives them a task to kind of beat. So and then with like we have some launch monitors that we bought that Howard found on Amazon for like $100. That's what you saw the kids when they were doing the bat speed stuff. So like you can do so much stuff with just a radar or a stopwatch that I think you can get like have a really good jumping off spot there.
Thank you very much. Let's do at least one more if we can keep going rapid fire here. Heather, we'll come back to you. How many of your current student athletes were using high-level technology when you were recruiting them? And has that changed the way that you coach because of what they were used to when they got to you?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm not exactly sure how many of them were actually like comprehensively understanding what might have been being used. I think the most prevalent thing that was in their experience was like bat speed, whether that be just like one of those little small units or something. So definitely being mindful of that. There are measurements for your skills. So certainly they're at a pretty high level in terms of knowing some of that stuff and what their information is. So anything that we can do to keep up with that and also advance that for us is important.
Thank you. Troy, one of the questions is about kind of a paralysis and analysis, right? Of how much is too much when it comes to sharing. How do you figure that out with your student athletes? Because I assume it's different for all of them.
Yeah, I like I said, I think because we're all still in this data collecting phase and trying to figure out what a lot of this stuff means on a bigger, grander scheme, it's picking out just a couple of things to focus on. And from a hitting standpoint, we're focused on trying to maximize how can we hit it hard and how can we repeat that swing, and what does my output as a hitter need to be to repeat that? Like, do I have to swing at 80% or am I 100% swinger every single time? There's going to be when we try to figure it out in the cages with them, there's going to be that level of I need to swing at 85% if I want to be able to consistently repeat this swing and be able to have some adjustability in my swing when a live pitch is coming at me. So there's a lot of different rabbit holes this stuff can take you down, but when getting started or when getting into it, just jump into some of the very basic stuff and then you can expand off that. And we collect it all, but we're using exit velocity in the cages and on the field. Like, can we hit it hard? Who cares if it's on the ground, line drive, or in the air? Can we just hit it hard right now and fall, and we'll work on the rest later?
Thank you. Lindsay Howard, question in the chat. Are you using a range for exit velocity or using a range for launch angle? And how do you do that by student athlete or by hitter type? And, what would you add on that?
We definitely are using a range. When I popped up those tables, it kind of gave you what we saw. So when we first started like really looking at like if we were counting things as barrels, if we were looking at like we run a process scrimmage. When we scrimmage, we don't just keep score to see who wins. Like we give them a bunch of different points for different things. It tends to keep them more engaged and like actually staying in the process of like not just did I hit a home run. And so in that we get this big range of data and they get different points for certain things. So we kind of found the more we stayed between in launch, the more we stayed anywhere, depending on the person, between 15 to 35, then they were in a good spot. Georgia Clark can live 26 to 40 and still hit stuff out. But we know that because we have this, like Troy said, we've had the flight scope for a really long time. And then when we move to Yakkertech, our numbers will change a little bit. Like our exit velo numbers on the flight scope, like the max one we've ever seen come out of it is like 83. But then we go play at Texas A&M and they're running a Yakkertech, and all of a sudden our exit velos are up like 8 to 10 miles an hour on some of our kids. So like obviously they're reading things a tiny bit differently, but we at least know, like when we're measuring at home, that this is what matters for us all the time. And so we kind of see in that range where we want to live. Also for us playing at Tiger Park, our launch window is a lot lower than if we were playing at or in Arizona. Like Howard said, like I can crush something straight up in the air and it's got a shot to get out there. If I hit something straight up in the air here, it doesn't get out. So our range is smaller, but we have so much information that kind of lets us know. But for you guys that don't have all of this info, I think living anywhere from 10 to 25 degrees is a great launch to live in. I think that like once we really start to get above that, like Howard did a bunch of like when he was first learning about the numbers, like on how much like you cut stuff and how much it balloons up and just turns into a fly ball. So we like wanted to back our launches off. Our first year that we really dug into this, we got really disconnected in some of our kids. It got really high and like that wasn't where we wanted to live. And so that kind of let us know real fast that like we probably should lower where we're trying to like what we're trying to do on a daily basis. And so that was kind of how we lived in our range. And then like Troy said, he knows that if you can hit something above 64, it's probably going to play. And then so for us, like if you can hit something 60 plus, you get like this many points in your process. If you like in the process scrimmage, if you hit something 65 plus, you get this many points. If you're hitting something 68 plus, you get this many points. And it's just kind of like rewarding them for what we think matters. Like Rachel said, and like Heather talked about measuring what matters. Like then you have to celebrate what you think matters, because you can make the numbers mean whatever you want them to mean. And then that'll give you buy-in in certain spaces.
And it helps out with, lefty slappers. If you're going for exit velocity of 65 plus, the only time you're getting points. Well, your lefty slapper who's trying to chop things is never going to have any points. And so she wants to add to the team too. So now her might be 60 plus, might be get 2 points, where 65 might get 3. Well, she gets to contribute and put points on the board as well. So it keeps them from overswinging, running past the balls for slapper wise and doing things like that.
Howard, you took my next question. It's the lefty slapper. How do you use the data and the numbers when it's power driven in most contexts when we're hearing about it? So appreciate that. Heather, what would you add on a lefty slapper or short gamer on how you might use data and technology?
I had something I actually wanted to share real quick that could maybe help explain a little bit more of how do you line this up. But this is a ball flight scale that we teach our team, and it's without technology. It's just more of like what it looks like on a graph. So you have a 1 through an 8. This is my notes on an iPad, just Scribble Nation, but it's 1. We talk about being like an easy ground ball. 2 is a 2-hop ground ball. 3 is a 1-hop ground ball. The 4 is a top spin line drive that goes beyond the dirt. 5 is a knuckling line drive that'll go out onto the grass. 6 is a backspin line drive. 7's like a fliner, kind of like how you'd hit a 7-iron maybe in golf. And then 8 is a deep fly ball. 9 is like an I got it, just an easy fly ball to catch. And a 10 is a pop-up. So where I'm trying to answer this slapper question is you'd probably want to, say that these are like a 2-hop or like even like a 3-hop ground ball for a slapper, depending on what they're trying to do with the ball. But certainly you definitely want your slapper to be dynamic and know how to hit different pitches, because if you just try to do one type of a ground ball, you might miss a certain type of a pitch. Like it might be tough for you to chop a drop ball, or just certain pitches are harder to slap based on what you're trying to do with them. But I like this ball flight scale because it doesn't need a lot of technology, and it definitely gives you a common language to talk about when you're just talking about like maybe even exit velocity, or without exit velocity, and just like launch angle without saying the word launch angle.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate that. One of the best things I heard at a coach's clinic last year was every ball you hit has a launch angle. Every single one. Every ball has a launch angle. And I thought that was really, really great. I'm going to give this last question that I have up for anyone. Panelists, you can speak or just put it in the chat. But this question came in 3 or 4 times of what's the simplest app I can use to help a student athlete with their swing that maybe I can overlay or I can draw on or I can show side by side. Several mentions of I used to use Coach's Eye, but it's no longer available. So if you have an app developer around, they might be able to make a killing on this one, just something simple they can use. But if you have an idea, attendee or panelist, anybody out there that's got something they like, go ahead and throw it in the chat. If anybody has anything to add on that, feel free.
I think the best Coach's Eye alternative right now is called Physmo. It's like PHYS and then Mo, and they use it in a lot of like golf, cheerleading, like those kind of spaces. I like, but it does what you want it to do in that space. There's also a video delay app, which is really cool. And like, so you can set your iPad up and it can be like filming the kids hitting, and like when they roll out of their round, and like they come to like they can watch their swings while the next kid is hitting, but it's still video, and the next kid that's hitting, you can put it on whatever delay you want, and so that's like a really helpful tool in that space too. But Physmo is like kind of the Coach's Eye replacement that you can kind of still overlay and draw on. But honestly, your iPhone alone, like the camera functionality of your iPhone right now is stupid. So like, instead of spending a lot of money on a lot of crazy things, like just figure out how to use your iPhone efficiently, and you can do some really, really cool things. Like some of our actual handheld cameras that we have around Tiger Park, they have less frames per second than like your actual iPhone does. So I think there's a spot where like you can just use your phone for slow-mo and stuff like that. And then if you like, the markup tool on it does it, and you can even video record your markup tool on your iPhone without having to use like a different like outside app.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Coach. And thank you everyone for jumping in. Just like that, we are out of time. And I know we had a great turnout. This will be in your coach's box for those of you that just couldn't keep up. I'm one of them. It'll be in your coach's box for you by the end of the week. We hope you enjoyed it. And we hope we can see you in San Antonio coming up in December. It's going to be fantastic. More hitting, more technology, and everything else that you might be looking for will be there for you. And then don't forget our regional coaches clinics. Those will start in December as well, go all the way through January. And those are a lot of great opportunities to learn from coaches, just like you heard today. In fact, some of these coaches will be there. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.